Section 16.10, Applications of Sound in Medicine. This is a bonus section, it's just because it's cool. So there are a number of different applications of sound. One of them is if you scan ultrasonic waves across the body and detect the echoes from various locations, right, similar to a sonar setup, you can actually obtain an image, right? This is getting an ultrasound. It's using sound to form an image. The reflections happen every time the pulse reaches some sort of boundary, right, between fluid and tissue, or you can see other things like a fetus or tumors because you're able to detect a change, something different. So usually for this to work, it needs to be a really high frequency. And that's because you need it to be a really small wavelength. The speed of sound in tissue is something like 1500 meters per second. It's very fast. You need a very small wavelength in order to be able to detect these things because the wavelength must be the same size or smaller than the object you want to detect. So usually the frequency on an ultrasound is in the range of 1 to 15 megahertz, 1 to 15 times 10 to the 10 hertz. And you're able to get these really cool images out when you do that. Another cool application is ultrasonic sound waves can cause a tip of a probe to vibrate at a really high frequency, 23 kilohertz, and shatter sections of the tumor that it touches, right? So that's really neat. This is just the right ultrasonic vibrations to take out the tumor without damaging other things around it. Cool. Another one that we have is the Doppler effect. So there's a transmitter and a receiver that can be placed on the skin that sends an instant sound into the red blood cell, and the reflected sound comes back. When the sound is reflected from the red blood cells, the frequency is changed in a Doppler effect way because the cells are moving. So it picks up on that relative motion. And this is then able to detect regions where, say, blood vessels have narrowed, which if we think back to our fluids chapter, if the cross-sectional area gets smaller, what does that mean for the velocity? That means the speed increases, right? That's something the Doppler effect can detect. It's going to change the frequency if you have one speed versus another speed. Pretty nifty. This can, it turns out, detect the motion of a fetal heart even 8 to 10 weeks after conception. Super cool. That's a really sensitive technique. So these are just some of the applications of sound in medicine. As you can see, there's quite a bit there. One more bonus material, section 16.11, the sensitivity of the human ear. So it turns out not all frequencies are equally sensitive. At really loud intensity levels, most frequencies sound about the same, right? This curve is pretty even. But if you're, say, at 100 decibels, everything is about at 100 decibels. But as you drop down to some really low intensity levels, what you'll find is that you start to lose a lot of the really low frequencies and the high frequencies. It just seems like they aren't there because your ear isn't sensitive to them. It can still pick up the mid-range frequencies at these low intensity levels, but the others are out of reach. They are below the threshold of hearing. So pretty interesting to see. The human body is amazing in all the ways it works. And so this is just one more instance of that and another application of sound. So this pulls us through the end of chapter 16, where we took a look at waves and sound.